as I was just saying, there's a Q&A app where you should ask questions if you have them. Yes, correct. That is what I was. Indeed, we are waiting for people to join, although I was just starting. And there's a showcase app where I have shared one Pastebin URL with some things that are sort of EP level questions or sort of interview type level questions that will be kind of answering along the way. So with that, and like I said, you should theoretically be able to join this as a regular, like I can actually see you. It's up to you whether you want to do that. That's whatever. With that, I will start by looking at this very Pastebin and discuss what sort of. So as you may or may not know, we are going to look at the survey that I passed out before I started this for what people wanted to hear about and what people wanted to see me code up. And so what we're going to do is actually write some Google Apps script to process the survey and output it in a slightly more readable format. So, yes, okay. So this was the survey, and these are sort of the answers. Most of the questions were checkboxes, and most of the answers were obviously checking those. There's one that's not a checkbox, but most of these were like this. Unfortunately, if I click on view responses, this is the sort of format that it gives me by default. So this was, I got this for basically for free by just saying, and record my responses in a spreadsheet, please. So this right here is not super readable, and not only that, it's not super even machine readable because it's just comma separated text, and it doesn't work really well if some of my actual like fields have a comma in them. So the first thing I basically had to do is process this to come up with something like this, where I actually had the timestamp of the response and X marks for a thing that they checked. And this is basically what we're going to be making today, plus a few other things, plus we'll get into Twitter if we have time. So as I was saying, the types of EP interview questions would be flatten a list of strings. So a list of strings might be, you know, a list of the questions, and for each question, there's a list of the answers that people actually checked. So it's a list of lists of answers. And what we really want is just a nice flat, you know, these are all of the checkboxes that people checked. I don't care what the question was they were answering. I just want all the checkboxes that they checked. And then to turn that into these nice X's, we might say, well, given this flattened list of strings of all of the possible answers ever, and given, you know, some more lists of strings that are in just a subset, what did this person check of them? So each response is a subset of the master list of all the questions that were actually asked. Return an array of booleans representing what people checked. So this is basically an array of booleans, except for blank is false and not blank is true. We probably won't make an actual array of booleans. We'll probably be working in the spreadsheet, and it won't be the most efficient answer, but we'll get to that idea, that general idea. And then we might get to make an array that's sort of graph the time availability of people like Sunday night or whatever versus what they actually want to hear, topic desirability, and tell me what's gonna get me the most people. So I ended up choosing Sunday night and Google Apps script. And was that the optimal choice? And we'll answer all these questions by writing pretty spreadsheets. And there's some open-ended stretch goals, but we probably won't get to these because we probably want to get to Twitter because a few people wanted to scrape Twitter. All right, so let's get started. As you saw, all I started with was having this survey. And I clicked on view responses to get this very same spreadsheet opened up. And no questions yet, cool. And now we're gonna pretend that none of this exists, or this, or this. These are the kinds of things we're gonna be making. So this is actually, we're gonna fill this in. So graphing times versus answers for, well, they're all answers, versus topics. So I can see if there are any questions. Again, there's a Q&A app. Please ask questions in the Q&A app, or if you wanted to try to figure out how Hangouts on Air works, feel free to try to log in as like a participant. By the way, you can see there's also a chat, so I should be able to see the chat also. Now you can see me. That's my kitchen. This is my app. So, Q&A. I will have Q&A open, so this is what we will be making the first time around. So how do we do that? Well, since the answer, there are two documents here, the questions and the answers. The answers document is not usable to us right now because, yeah, it's just a mess. So we can work in the questions, and we'll go to Tools, Script Editor. And again, there are all these scripts I already made because I was testing this out, making sure I could actually do the thing that I was going to show you. But here's an empty script that we're just going to run. So when you first start up Google, Google Apps Script, they're usually using Tools Script Editor. It'll actually give you the option of getting either a blank app or getting a template that's filled with all kinds of stuff you may or may not find useful. So I actually, usually when I don't know how like forms works or something, I'll start with a template and work with that. But right now, we just want an empty one because I sort of remember what I'm doing. And so the only other thing I really had open here before this was our outfit is I pre-Googled Google Apps Script format. It knows. And basically class format, and that's how I got here. Documentation is great, especially like this developer documentation is very useful. And it actually even remembers where you went, so it's handy for navigation. Half the time I just Google it anyway. So the first thing we want is to get our form. So we can say var, this is JavaScript, and in JavaScript to make a local variable you say var, our form dot, and it's very nice. It's got Google Apps Script, the IDE has all kinds of things. So we really just want the active form. We want the form that this script is attached to, which, because we started from this form, it's that one. Cool. So now we can say our form, and it even knows what kind of thing it is. Dot, and what we really want is the response spreadsheet, because that's where we want to write stuff out to. Somewhere in here. Oh, no, I was wrong. This is what you do. I Googled this also. So var spreadsheet equals spreadsheet app. So in addition to form app, there's a spreadsheet app, which is just a general class for dealing with spreadsheets in general. Open by ID, and the form, which we called our form, has a get destination ID function that gets the ID of this thing. So now SS contains this spreadsheet. So we'll say ss dot add, nope, create new dot insert. So normally I would also look it up in documentation. Insert sheet. That's it. We've inserted a sheet, and we probably want to store what it's called, what that sheet is. Well, we haven't yet because we didn't run it in a variable, and we'll call it sheet. So to run it, we'll just click run, and hey, it's got a brand new sheet we just inserted, so we'll just delete that. Yes. Questions? No questions? Okay, cool. Insert the sheet. After this, we might want to name it, this sheet, just because that name just because we want to be able to find it later. And we run this function, and here it goes. Checkbox is live. It's a sheet. So if we run it again, Command R is what I'm doing. It'll give us an error because, hey, that already exists. That's okay. You may notice that even though it gave us an error, it actually did make a new sheet because it was trying to do stuff until it ran into an error. So that may or may not be problematic. We'll add something later to make it less problematic. Now that we've got this sheet, what do we actually want to do with it? Well, really we didn't need the sheet yet because what we're trying to do is read all of these in. So we're looking at the form right now. Our form. I called it our form. Dot. Items. This is the one we want. Get items, item type. Because forms. Because we only want the checkbox items, right? We don't want that blank, this field. We don't care about this one. So if we go to form and we look up get items, item type, and we look up item type, we can see that it's called checkbox. And this is how it works. So we can just go like this and say checkbox. I'm just gonna make sure that doesn't cause any errors. Okay, cool. Now we've got these items, so we can actually do something. Oh, I didn't. And so we ran it, and now if I look at this log, wonderful, we've got 5 items. It doesn't expand it further than that, but that's okay. And so I'll actually add one more thing. Or no, I'll add it later. So now we've got 5 items. So if we want to look at all of the things there, we'll have a for loop. I is less than checkbox items dot. And it's nice enough to give us this pop-up for the array class for JavaScript, and length is what I'm looking for. So for each item, maybe then we'll log. Thank you very much. All of these things are items. as checkbox items. So when you do the get items function, it returns a set of some kind of item. It doesn't know what kind. So when we say as checkbox item, we're promising it that it's probably a checkbox item, and you can convert it to that. So that's useful because, well, first of all, now it knows they're checkbox items. Second, when we do this, we can, our question, we can say things like question dot, and now that it knows it's a checkbox, it gives us things like create choice, get choices. So choices only applies to checkbox type items, for example. So that all of these things we would still be able to use them, but they wouldn't come up in the nice little helper thingy. So in fact, we do want to get choices, right? That's not doing it. Wonderful. So now we've got for each item, it gives us a list of choices, which are objects of type choice. So for example, the second question has 4 choices. So it's got 4 choices. Oh wait, that's not the second question. This is the second question. Yes. Very helpful, thank you. So maybe we'll store that in a variable. And then we'll have another loop inside this loop, because we want to look at each and every single one of these choices. Now we're saying for each question and for each choice in that question, log the thing. Now it's giving us more of a flat list of choices. Oh, hey, that's sort of a lot like what we're looking for. So we don't quite want to say just choice, 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 right? We want the actual text for it. So maybe it'll tell us, get value. Maybe that's what we need. Hey, look, here we go. It's a flat list of all of the things that we actually wanted. Cool. So now, instead of logging it, we might want to write it to some kind of array. So we'll say var flat items. Flat just means it's a list of things, as in this case strings, as opposed to a list of lists of stuff. And we'll make it an empty array. So instead of logging the choices, we will say items dot push. This is the thing we're pushing. Oh, and there's no logging out there because I didn't log anything. Yay, so now you can see sort of that it's an array of things that are comma separated. So the logger does a very similar thing to what our automatic question tracking thingy did, except that you know, what we have programmatically is still an array of strings, so we can still work with them. And now we can write them out to the spreadsheet maybe. So we'll uncomment these. And now we've got the sheet again. It'll make a new sheet. And what we'll do is dot whenever you're writing or reading from a spreadsheet in Google, you have to actually work with a range. A range is like if I select all of these, that's a range, or all of these, that's a range. It's basically, or even one item is a range. It's a set of values. So sheet dot get range. Yes, get range. We probably want this one. We want to say how many rows and columns and stuff we want to say. So we'll start at, that's the start row. That is the start column. We'll start at 1, 1 for now. We might change this later. And how many rows will we have? Well, we'll have 1 row because I want this to be very similar to this. So it'll be 1 long row and as many columns as there are things. So 1 row, and now columns will be length. So now we've got this range, and now we can set the value for it. Set values plural. So set values, as you may have seen, takes in an array of arrays. So it's got to be a 2-dimensional array because a range is a 2-dimensional thing. So we'll take the flat items, which is 1 array, and we'll put it inside some square brackets, which will make it a 2-dimensional thingy. And it ran, and we've got the checkboxes, and we've got this thing. Yay. As a nice side effect, it actually expanded our spreadsheet cleverly when it realized that we had too much stuff. So instead of starting at 1, I'm going to start at 2. By the way, these rows and columns are in fact 1 indexed, which is different from most programming. You're used to maybe that the first thing is index 0, but when you're talking about the rows and columns specifically, that starts at 1. So it's nice in that it corresponds to these numbers. So we'll start row 2. Well, no, row 1, column 2. Yes. Okay. And we'll delete this because otherwise it'll complain at us. Yes. Okay. They won't. If I don't name it, then it'll not care that there's a collision because it'll just create a new one every time. And we ran it, and we've got this. So now let's look at all the responses to the form. We've got all of our checkbox stuff. So our form dot get responses is an array of form responses. Any questions? No questions. 1 viewer. Wonderful. Anything else? Nope. Cool. Let's see this way. There we go. So get responses. And again, another loop. Basically the same thing, except not checkbox items. For each response, we'll want to do stuff with it. So what can we do with the response? We can get its ID. That's kind of useful. We can get all of the item responses. I think that's what we want. I think the item responses are a list of, oh no, item responses are a list of all of the questions that they've answered. So what we really want is to say, get the response for a specific item, being the checkbox question. Again, it's a little bit tricky because not all of the questions are checkbox questions. What kind of item? Well, that's an interesting question. That we have to go back and edit our previous code, because we haven't actually kept track of what all of the checkbox questions were. We kind of have this list here, but it's a little bit ugly, so I'd rather just have a list of IDs by which we can retrieve the items themselves. So similarly, we'll have a flat list, and for every question that we see, we'll say question.getID, and we'll store it in question IDs. So we'll get the ID and we'll push it onto this question IDs array. And now, what we actually want to do is for each response, and furthermore for each question type, we want to get all of the responses for that question type. There is a get. Oh, it's because I called the Alice one. Get item by ID. So we've got the ID. And we've got the item, and then we use the item to get the response for item. If I were trying to write code that was readable, I might separate this out into several lines and make variables for these intermediate thingies. So now we've got this response, and we probably do want to store that in a variable. What do we do with it? We can get an item, or we can get a response. Get response, I think, will actually get, let's try it. An array of things, an array of the things. We can't get call method get response of null. Now I know what this error is because I've messed with this form for a while. For some reason, one of the responses to this particular survey is just completely null. So we'll just say if then we do all this stuff. Cool. So oh, that didn't work very well because you can't check whether something is null before you assign. That wasn't very clear. And we'll get rid of this part. I feel like this is still not doing anything. Oh, hey, look at that. Now it's doing things. So I have had this problem before where Google Apps Script didn't actually exactly give me the latest thing I gave it, but this looks like it's working now. So it's actually giving us for each response a list for each sort of question response. It's giving us a list of all the stuff that people said. Cool. Now, and so now what do we want to do? Now we want to say that this for loop says for each line in this perspective sheet that we're making. Oh my goodness. So for each one of these lines, we're doing stuff. That's our for I loop. So what we want to do now is compile a list of all the answers inside this loop, because this loop says for each row. So we want to compile all answers for a row. So now all we do is we can actually sort of shortcut it, because there's a thing called concat. So instead of doing this loop, this kind of loop where for each item we will push it back into the array, we could have just said flat items dot concat choices, and that would do exactly the same thing theoretically. Okay, maybe we just won't do it. Sometimes things happen and you don't understand them. Yes, it is. I can spell. All of these are empty. Oh, that doesn't actually modify. Oh, I know why. It's because I didn't wait long enough for it. Okay. So now each of these logged outputs is a list of things that people actually checked. So what we did there is basically the flatten list question twice. So if we go back to the EP interview questions, we flattened a list of lists twice, except we also did some fiddly things in between, because these objects are a little bit more complicated than just a list of lists. But what is involved in flattening a list of lists is basically saying, all right, for each outermost list, for each question we asked, and for each checkbox in that question, push the thing onto the flat list. So it's a nested loop, and we've got to push. Here we cheated a little bit. Instead of doing another loop, we could have had a for var k equals 0 loop here that said, for each thing in this answers variable, push the new thing onto all answers. But we didn't feel like, well, I didn't feel like doing that. So I did concat. Some languages may or may not have concat. If you get asked this in an interview question, you may or may not be allowed to use concat, because it's kind of a complex thing, and they don't want you to just, you know, say, oh, my programming language will be able to do this for me. So cool. So now we've got a list of all the questions and a list of all the answers to a particular question. And we've got this beginning spreadsheet where we write down all these. And let's make it so that all of the timestamps for each response are written down here. How do we do that? Well, here's our loop that says for each response, do something. So we can say responses I dot get timestamp. And oh, by the way, in JavaScript, you're supposed to put semicolons at the end of a string, but I always forget because it doesn't complain at me. Done. So now we can write down the time in a cell. So we should say our sheet dot get range. And here we only want the range, a range that is like 1 wide. So we can just give it the row and column where we want to start, and we don't need to give it the number of rows and number of columns. I know this because I actually looked these functions up in documentation, just like this. So the row will be basically I, except I starts counting at 0, and we want to start putting stuff here. So we want to start counting at 2, so it'll be I plus 2. And column will be 1 because we just want to put it on the first column. So we've got this range, and now we want to set its value to the time. And our latest sheet. Yay, here it is. So that's how it is. One other thing is, I know I'm going to have to delete these later because 420 is when I was testing my application, so I answered some things, and these are bogus answers. So we'll delete those later, but not right now. Sheet 72, that's how many spreadsheets I've made in this. Cool. All right, now we have this and we have this. Now we just need the x's. So that's sort of the harder part. So that comes to our EP style question of, you've got all of these possible answers, and for each row you've got a subset of these. You've got, it says some chatbots, it says Boyd's, and it says other things. So how do you return sort of a list of booleans that says, no, they did not check this checkbox. Yes, they checked this checkbox. No, they did not check this one, and so on. The best way to do this would be to make some kind of dictionary or hash map object, because, and the reason that I know this, I think hash map immediately is because we've got a list of strings. We've got a list of things that say, this person checked the checkbox that says some chatbots and stuff. And what we want to look up based on this string is what row we're supposed to put an X in. So if we want to look up based on a string and get some kind of number, we probably want a hash map where the key is the string. So I would ideally make a hash map or a dictionary, or in JavaScript's case, an object, because in JavaScript, objects like random, this is a something object, are also associative arrays, which is another word for hash map. So that's what we want. I want to map from this string to basically the row that I want in it. So we've got our flat items list, which is just an array, basically. And we'll say believe like this. It's a new object. And we'll say for each thing in the flat items. Yeah, I got ahead of myself there. Theoretically, we should just be able to say, and I'm using Python terminology here because that's what I'm used to. So flat items I is the ith element of flat items like this. Choose your own adventure game and so on. And then we're saying use this as the key, and the value will be I, except again we'll add 2 to it because we want to offset it in the array. Let's see if it actually, okay, it didn't give us any errors. Let's log this object. Hopefully it'll tell us something helpful, and we won't log this anymore. Hey, yes. So here it is. It says, this answer should go in row 29. This answer should go in row 3, and so on. Now, whenever we want to say, well, this guy answered check this checkbox, because what we've got is a list of which checkboxes a person checked. We can say, which row should we put an X in? So we can actually still be inside this loop, because this loop still goes through the responses, but we probably want to be after this one. And if I highlight, yeah, okay, it's right here. After we've already recorded all of the answers, now we want to say, what are we on here? So J, I can just reuse J. I could name it whatever I wanted. We're going through all the things in all answers. And I have any questions? I have no questions. For each thing in there, in the answers, we will look it up in the items dict. Right, J. So all answers J will be one of the answers that they gave, and items dict at that item will be where we're supposed to put the X. So and now we will put the X there. So again, sheet dot get range. We just want this one because we just want the row and the column. So the row is going to be which response it is. So just like here, it's whatever we put the timestamp into. And the column is going to be whatever our location said. And we already did the +2 over here when we were setting the location. So that should be good. Value. We'll just set it to X. Sheet 75. Nope, didn't work. Why didn't it work? 1, 2. Did it not work? Oh, I know it didn't work. I forgot the link. Oh, yes, there's no logging output, but this new sheet has all of the X's. Yay. Okay. So here we are. That's our data. That was the first thing we wanted to accomplish. And it only took me 50 minutes. So here's spreadsheets has some nice things that you can play around with. For example, if I wanted to keep track of how many X's there are, for example, in this row, I could say, I could use a formula. So if you start a cell with equals, you can say count A counts, well, the number of values in a data set, and it's different from count in that it counts everything, where count just counts numeric ones. And instead of writing stuff like this down, I can actually go and select stuff and say, I want these things. And then I close the parenthesis, and I mouse away, and it says there are 8 X's in this column. What's really cool, I think, is that you can select this and copy it, Command-C, which copies the formula, not the 8. And if I go and select all of the things here, and I paste it, all I did was paste it, and it is smart enough to change the B to a C to transpose it because we're pasting it in a different place. So now we've got a nice little count each of all the answers that I answered, the questions I asked. So as I said, these 421s aren't actually real answers, so we'll delete these. and it updates, hopefully. Yep, see, it says to 17. Selection. And we will also delete this. This is the one that gives me trouble. It's just completely blank, and it's a completely empty, no null response that gave us that error. So the reason I kind of want to delete it is because if I ever wanted to say, like, what percentage of people wanted to hear about whatever this is, ET's telling me to say almost all of the people. So here we are. That's our x's. I still have one viewer. Awesome. So the next thing I want to make. So we'll actually name this sheet, and we'll say it's the next thing I wanted to do is basically fill out this topics and times table. So I want to say how many people want to do a choose your own adventure game, or see me make a choose your own adventure game, and they are available Monday evening. That's the number that would go here, and so on. That's also our third interview question. The way that you would do that is, actually, we'll probably just work with this because this is exact. Oh, no, it's not, because it doesn't include new answers, not in the count. It's the count that messed up. All right, we'll work with this. This checkboxes thingy, and we'll make something called a named range. So that this is basically very powerful. It's creating an array that you can work with in code from just selecting these things. So this is where the questions end. And I selected all of the x's, and I will say define named range. And I will call it topics 2, because there's already topics, because I already did this one. And then for all of the times, I will say define this range times 2. Now we can actually, as long as I don't delete this sheet and mess everything up, work with the name ranges. Yes, this is what we do. That's basically this code. So we can run this code, and maybe I'll name. Want to work? No, it does not want to work. I just want to actually name it so that I can find it. And I'll name it just so you don't get bored with like another set of nested loops. This is what I did to make this sheet. I can remake it if somebody asks me to in a question. But otherwise, I'll just move on. So if I actually run it, I should get a topics thing that has an array with no sort of no headers, but it's okay, we can add them. So the way that we would add the headers is we would go here, just manually, very manually. And paste these in. And these, these you can do like a transposed paste, but I'm lazy, so I'm copying it from when I did it before. This is spreadsheet ability, and I don't remember how to do this. So I guess that's an exercise for the reader. So now we've got this nice table that says how many people not found because, yes, there are not enough answers. Really. How many people for each thing wanted to do something like that? Oh, I know what I did. These are the questions. These are the times. No. Copy these things. Perfect. Okay, so now we've got this table. Now, one other cool thing you can do in spreadsheets is conditional formatting. So there's actually, you could just say, please do a color scale that ranges from widest for least, smallest number, and greenest for largest number. So we can at a glance see, oh, look at that. A lot of people wanted to go do Sunday late evening, and a lot of people wanted to do these things. Well, I wonder what these things are. This is, what is it called? Well, it's a thing that makes this not scroll. So now we can actually say, so a lot of people wanted to see this kind of interview problem and this kind of interview problem. And small data. Now, small data has a lot of spread across all the things. So yeah. You may notice that there are actually new, really new answers that happened way after. That's what I say in my defense. Cool. That's basically it. I also made these chart things. So this is based on the x's. Actually, why don't we start over? So we'll take this sheet 75 checkboxes. Yes, this one, which we just made. And what I wanted to see is the trends of basically the answer time versus the total number of people who wanted to do that thing by that time. So I wanted to get very similar to this, but a cumulative total of sort of by this answer, 4 people checked this checkbox. So it's very similar to this, and I will make a new sheet, and I will name it F. And on line 17, just like here, I will say, okay, let's go up to 16. I will say this line should equal to count A, and it'll be very similar to what I did before. Count A of this stuff. Nope. Bad thing. No. Count A checkboxes B2 to, I will just manually add it, B16. 8. Just like here. So B2 to B16. Now, the difference that I'm going to make is, you remember how things changed when I pasted this? Well, I don't want the 2 part changing ever. So I'm going to paste this all over the place, but I don't want it to change where I start counting. I only want to change where I finish counting and all that stuff. So I'm anchoring the 2 by putting a $sign before it. So what that means is, if I paste it here, it's going to say B2 to B15. So it changed the 16 to 15 because I'm changing here. Spreadsheets are pretty trippy like that. Like, you can do crazy stuff with them. So I can just paste it all over here and all the way to AH. So I'm going to add a bunch. In order to add a bunch of stuff, you select how much stuff you want to add, and you do insert 9. Insert, and it'll tell you how much. And I just remember that it goes up to H. And goes down to 16. 16. Yay. So now we've got these numbers. And I'll copy the headers from here again. And I will copy these things. We've got this count that says, all right, by this survey, there were 1 answers who wanted interactive to be physics. By this one, there were 10. And if we take all of this and we say, we would like a graph, please. Where's the graph button? There's usually a button for we would like a graph, please. But you can also right click and say, all right, chart, yes, there we go, chart. So this type of chart is, it basically stacks everything on top. What I kind of really wanted is more of a line chart, so it's sort of like this, where it says, so each line is independent versus the area chart where each line is on top of each other. And I just like the soft edges. So it's very smart actually, because you can see that it's spacing it out by saying, oh, a bunch of people wanted a bunch of stuff by the 15th, and then a couple more started wanting more stuff by on the 30th and the 1st, and then here it is. So it's actually spacing out the dates as if they were dates. It's smart enough to know about dates. So we can insert this chart. There's also, if you do it without the dates, it'll look slightly differently. It'll look evenly spaced per response. Charts, lines, these kind of lines. Insert, where is it? Oh. So you can see that instead of having this huge space between the 15th and so on, it's somewhere in here, and all of these responses sort of happened on the 15th. Oh, you can't see my mouse, can you? That's okay. So yeah, 2 different types of charts. Charts are cool. Cool. Still have a viewer. Wonderful. Now, that's it for the joy of cognitive processing. Now let's talk about Twitter. Close over this. Yay. I will screen share my other prepared window. This is Bob Ross, painting happy little trees. So there's a hashtag on Twitter called stress relief in 4 words, which I thought might be like actually useful to scrape and look at, because 4 words, if you've got a bunch of data that's all 4 words long, you might be able to do some interesting stuff with it later. We're not going to get to that part, because when I was doing it, I didn't even get to the part where I even get the 4 words, because people don't follow their own rules. Like, this is not, where are the 4 words? Which are the 4 words here? But we can at least suck in Twitter things, and by just running this function, which we'll remake in a moment, we add new tweets to the bottom. Run it again. More tweets. The thing about AppScript that's also nice is that you can actually set up a trigger. Yes. And you can say, please run, get some tweets every 5 minutes. Bam. And now it's going to do that. It's just going to keep getting more and more tweets for me. So how did I do this? I have this open somewhere else. Well, I opened up the Google Apps Script external API documentation, and hey, it has a thing for Twitter right here. This is what you do to make Twitter work with Google Apps Script. And I also opened up the Twitter API, because I wasn't actually like going in and scraping web pages for this. I am using a thing that Twitter made for program access. So I learned how to do this, which we'll look at in a moment. And in order to do this, you actually have to have a Twitter app set up, because Twitter wants to keep track of who is using this programmatically, who and for what. Well, not really for what. They just wanted to know who and how much are making requests to their site. So I set this up. This is also an exercise for the reader. It's basically you go to dev.twitter.com and just realized something. You go to manage your apps, and then it'll ask you to sign in, and then you'll make a new app, and here we are on the same exact page. So the reason you want to set this up is that you need this key. You need the consumer key, and you also need the secret, which I shouldn't be showing you because it's a secret. It's the password that my app, that the way Twitter recognizes that that's my app doing this thing. So, and you also need these things. So this is what I did, actually. I just realized that there was another little weird thing that you had to do. Okay. So I just made a new Google Sheet, and then in this new sheet, I went and said, again, script editor. You may notice that Sheets has a lot more tools than Forms did, but you just still go to editor, and you can choose all kinds of things. You can choose blank project, web app. I chose custom functions in Sheets because it gave me one file. It gave me a bunch of ideas about how to use stuff, and it's very well documented. But actually, all I did was I deleted this file. But when you're doing this, you can do that also. Oh wait, no, yes, I can do this, I think. So the other glitch, weird thing that I had to deal with is that Twitter, the dialog box for the Twitter permission for my app to be able to access my account was not showing up when I was running my code, and so weird things happen. So that is all very interesting because one, you have to let Google Apps use your thing. Two, you have to tell Twitter, yes, I am Yana on Twitter, and this particular application can access my account, because the way that this external API works is that it's read-write. So in theory, I could even tweet as myself. I could write a robot that tweets as myself. So all of that access has to be ratified by Twitter and also by Google Apps, because it's going to say, hey, are you sure that you want to access external things? So authorization is great. This is a very abbreviated version of this. It's annoying. So how do I make a function in JavaScript? It is function. Function, I say. And I just copied all of this code, literally all of it, from this documentation. And I'm pasting it in here. And I'm tabbing it over so it fits well. And these things, well, I need to copy them from my actual app. So that's my consumer key. If I go into here, I can get my secret password and oh no. And all of this boilerplate stuff just tells it, this is where you go to do all of these dialogue thingies and tell Twitter who you are and get all kinds of answers that tell it to do things. So this is actually a simplified version because Google Apps Script does a lot of things for you. If you wanted to sort of really look into this, you can read this authentication and authorization section and how it all works. And I was trying to sort of do this application only authentication, which would mean that I wouldn't have to tell Twitter, yes, it's okay to use my account, because it would. The only thing is you would be able to read anything, but you would be basically not a Twitter user, or your application would be not a Twitter user, so you wouldn't be able to obviously post tweets or do anything like that. But yeah, graphs, charts, nope, nope, nope. I'm just copy and pasting code from Google. Yay. Right, so this should work. Now we will run the code. And it says it needs authorization, yes. And yes, accept. Now, yeah, that's what it gave me last time. Authorization is required to perform that action. That's, you might say, what, I just gave you authorization. Well, that I gave you authorization on the Google side, and now we need to authorize it on the Twitter side so that Twitter knows this is okay. And that's how we do it. So this is I clicked debug instead of run, and debug actually brings up the proper dialog boxes. And aren't I glad I did this? I spent 2 hours on this before the class, or before this show, not during it. So now it should hopefully possibly work. If I stop it and I click run, it did something. There are errors. It says these are deprecated. Well, too bad, because there aren't any non-deprecated ones that I can use. So what does this do? So this does all the keys. This does authentication. And this is sort of the important part that we do want to understand. So URL says, this is the API URL. That's the request I want to make. That's the thing I'm asking for. And then this says, okay, go ask for it now and use these options. And then we get the response. And JSON is the data format it's basically a bunch of brackets like this and array brackets like this, all nested inside of each other to just say, here's a bunch of data. It's kind of similar to XML, but less wordy, that sort of thing. It's just a computer readable data format that we can just get at. And we'll look at what it looks like in a moment. So parse this big JSON thingy in a computer readable format so that I can then say, get the ID of this tweet, or get the text of this tweet, and so on. So unsurprisingly, if you try to get my user timeline, I've just created my Twitter account for this purpose, you will get nothing. So that's not very useful. What we really want is to search for some kind of tweet and get tweets that respond to that. So let's just search for this. That's what I wanted to scrape. Here are some results. And I clicked on it because it says, let's search for a thing. So these are really good instructions on the Twitter public REST API. And so all it says is do the search and then replace whatever URL you ended up with right here. We don't want the source. This SRC is extra. We will copy it. We will paste it instead of this URL. But we don't want this bit. What we want is this. Replace it. And you can see that it did something. It changed that little hash pound into a %23. That's good. So now if we run the program again, and then we also actually try to see what the tweets are, maybe it'll, okay. Yeah, look at that. There is a whole bunch of data. This is JSON. This is what it looks like. It's just a bunch of data that's not very readable, and we don't know what to do with it. But that's okay, because Twitter also has this very nifty tool, which, excuse me, I would like to open it in a new tab, which lets us, hello, there it is. I was thinking, yeah, wants to do all of these things again. Okay, here we go. Permissions, yay. Okay, are you gonna let me? I would select an API method if you would let me. There we go. Okay, so we know we want to search for some tweets. So we're selecting this method, and our query will be, well, the same thing we searched for before. And okay, that's enough for now. Let's click send. It's thinking about it. And it gives us a bunch of output. This is the exact same thing that we just saw in that log, but formatted better. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So here it is. There's statuses. There's some metadata. We don't care about metadata. And so each there's, in fact, 10 of these statuses. There's an ID. Here's the text. This is the thing we sort of really care about. This is the text of the tweet that it gave us. So we know that to look for the text, we want to say statuses, and then we want to say some number, which tweet we're looking at. So we can start with 0, and then we want to go to text. So remembering all of this in memory, we can say in fact, we'll just make some more variables. Tweets dot statuses. Now, the autocomplete doesn't know anymore what we're looking for because it can't automatically know how this particular JSON will parse until it actually gets it. But we know that the tweets will have a thing called statuses. And so now instead of logging the tweets, we can say another for loop. Try this. Cool. So now it's a little bit less low level. So we can even say log text, because as we remember from here, it's called, the field that we're looking for is called text. Cool. Okay, so now we're actually logging all of the tweets, or all the tweets that Twitter gives us, which is 30, I think, 30 of them by default, that have this thing in it. And oh joy, we even get little emoticons. There are a bunch of disclaimers on the search API that are all like, this isn't all of them, this is just the relevance, not completeness, blah, blah, blah. That's okay. We don't really care about completeness right now. If we did, we'd probably not use the REST API. We would use the fancy streaming stuff or something even fancier, but we don't want to do that right now. Okay, so now we've got this text. We can also log things like the ID and the, what is it called? Again, when I'm taking these from memory from here. Although, actually, I'll log the string, because I remember something bad about the ID. And we kind of care about this also. Maybe. Maybe we don't. Cool. So for each one, we're logging the ID, the time, and what got tweeted. So instead of logging these, we can now put these into an array. Okay. And I should really say var data. So JavaScript will not give me an error if I just start using a variable I haven't made yet, but it will make that variable global, which is sort of bad. So whenever you're making a new variable, you may want to say var. Cool. And now we'll also make another list. And just like we were doing before, push the data onto this list of tweets. So now if we log at the very end, we'll see that it's, oh, yep, it's a slightly less human readable form, but it will be better for putting into a spreadsheet. So we've got this on data, by the way, I'll rename it. We've got the spreadsheet, and how do we do that? We say spreadsheet app dot get active spreadsheet. So that's this one that we're connected to. And then we'll say dot get active sheet. This time I'm not going to make a new sheet every time. I'm just going to say just use the very first one. That's the one I want you to use. Or whichever one is currently active, which is the only one. And I'll make variable culture. So we will get a range that starts with 1, 1. So start at the very top. The number of rows, so we'll have as many rows as there are tweets. The number of columns is 3 because there are 3 things we're storing. We're storing the ID, the timestamp, and the actual tweet. So we got this range. Now we can just set the values to the list of tweets. Yes, thank you, yes, accept. Okay. Oh, that's because that's a different type of authorization. That's for editing the spreadsheet. Okay, did you do anything? Set values. Hi. Okay. Didn't complain. Oh, here it is. Okay, there we go. So 15. It gave us 15 tweets. But maybe we want more than 15 tweets. Maybe we want to like continue going after this. So the reason I logged the IDs is that we can actually, back in the API, we can say, well, wait a second. I don't want the top 5 you're going to give me. I would like to max ID. Return results with an ID less than, that is older than or equal to the specified ID. So by default, it gives us 15 of the most recent ones. But then we want to say, all right, you gave us these 15. Now take the oldest one of those, which is the last one in the list, and give us every 15 that came before that. And I think 15 is just the default of how many results it returns when I ask it for stuff. So I'll send this, and it gives me 15 different tweets. You may notice that the only thing that changed about this is the max ID. So how do we work with that? We can sort of start writing the same exact code, but, and I'm putting a divider here because we're not going to keep most of this code, because most of it will be copy pasted. So the URL we've got now, we actually want something like this. We want to add the max ID field. And we don't actually want to say this particular specific ID. We want to say something, the last ID that we had. Now we have to find that. Okay, so we can say sheet dot get last row. And get last row doesn't get you the last sort of blank row. There is another function for that, but get last row gets you this one, the last row with actual data in it. And it gives you just its number. So that'll give us 15 right now. Here. And now we can say, please get us the value in that box. So first we have to get the range. The row will be the last row. The column will be 1 because we want the ID, which we're storing in the first column. And then we will get the value in there. So that'll be our last ID. And that's what we want. We want to say, use this URL with the max ID. And after that, it's pretty much all the same stuff. We will fetch and we will parse and we will handle it. And we'll get all the list of tweets. And after we do that, we will write out that list of tweets right here. But instead of starting at row 1, we want to start at last row plus 1, because we want to write down the new ones after this. We don't want to overwrite them right here. We want to start at 16. So if the last row is 15, we'll start at 16. So theoretically, that should do it. Last row is not defined because I misspelled some. Oh, right. That's right. I didn't capitalize it. Cool. And now we've got 30, which is exactly how many. Ideally, we wouldn't just have this copy pasted, and we want to combine this code so that it says, if there's nothing in the sheet, in the spreadsheet, because they'll start out with an empty spreadsheet. If there's nothing, then start at 0. Otherwise, add the max ID and do everything the same exact way. So we'll take all of it. We'll take this. This we still need at the very beginning. Well, after all the auth stuff anyway. So we'll find the last row, and we will say if last row, oh, this is not Python, this is JavaScript, is greater than 0. So that means there's already stuff in the spreadsheet. If there's no stuff in the spreadsheet, the last row will be 0. Then, actually, we'll put the URL over here. We'll start off with this URL. So last row is greater than 0. Well, first of all, we want to figure out what the last ID is. Then we want to say basically this. But we could say it like that. We could also just say, well, we can't do that. This is all of the stuff that's already in here in the URL. So we can say URL is equal to whatever it used to be, which is this stuff, plus the max ID field, plus the last ID. In fact, we'll just do this. Plus equals. And now we don't need any of this stuff except for all I did. So the only difference here is this last row bit. When we're actually writing stuff down, we want to say write it down after everything that we've already had. So this we don't need anymore. So what was the benefit of this? Well, every time now we run our get tweets. Yep, I broke it. Cannot call method get last row of undefined. Oh, yes. This is the same exact thing I did last time. What should probably, if I'm using the sheet right here, I should probably define it up here. And we don't care about the logging output, but we do care about this. So this time, we did the exact same thing we did before. We got the first 15 tweets. But now all we have to do is hit Command R or the play button again. And every time we hit it, it gives us 15 more. Yay. And again, now we can say something like, set up a trigger where the get tweets thingy will get called every 5 minutes. So I wonder if my other, I can't spell, thing. Oh yeah, look at that. If only I could figure out where my IM is. Somebody's IM in me. I have a feeling it's because of this. Okay. Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much Twitter scraping. This is a time I decided to scrape Reddit and get, so Reddit is, on the one hand, it doesn't have this very nice view, but there are things, if you Google like JSON visualize, you can just dump all of that yucky stuff into it and it'll do the same exact thing for you. But Reddit doesn't ask you to authenticate at all. So Reddit, you can just do a URL and get all the stuff back. You don't need any of that OAuth boilerplate. You don't have to make an account or anything. So this is a time where I made a Reddit scraper to figure out a thing about, there was a show called Serial about murders, and I wanted to look at whether people's opinions changed towards the positive or negative, and whether certain keywords got used more or less after an episode. And so I scraped a bunch of Reddit posts, and I was looking at words and the combination of words, and apparently I deleted all of the combinations of words. So I was looking for like these three words together, like Adnan is guilty, are used very often, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of thing you can do with data scraping. I wanted to do this with this, but again, there's like a whole, trying to get the 4 words that are supposed to be 4 words stress relief would be a whole other lesson, I think. So like these are the 4 words here, but oh my god, a puppy room, yes please, is not 4 words. So and to process that programmatically would be very weird. So that's Twitter. That's it. Questions? Cool. So this is, I feel like it's recorded. And hopefully next time more people might show up. And yay, thank you one person for listening to it, hopefully. Okay. Bye, everyone.